Hey, welcome back to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to follow and subscribe, and if you enjoy what we're talking about, please share it with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I talk about things we find interesting. And today's topic is enabling versus support. What is the difference? I mean, no, it's very confusing, I think.
It is, because it's a very blurry line. Oftentimes, at least in my experience, I found when I think I'm supporting someone, I was actually enabling them.
Ooh. Yeah, how do we tell the difference?
It's really hard. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of self-examination. And I personally have a few questions that I kind of ask myself. And one of them usually starts with, am I doing something for someone that they could do for themselves?
Right.
Now, obviously, if my wife is having a hard day, like she just mowed the lawn, and she would ask me, hey, could you get up and get me a drink out of the refrigerator? Now, granted, she could get up and do it herself. By that definition, if I do it, I'm enabling her. But here comes the next step is, I realize she did something hard. I want to show her my appreciation that she did that hard lawn work in the hot sun. So I get up and get her a drink. I'm not doing it to enable her. I'm doing it to show appreciation. So I also look at my motivation for doing it.
Right. Yeah.
Now that's a simple example.
Right. I love that example, though, because for me, it's growing up in a family where any support was seen as enabling is confusing. And I think it's confusing for exactly the reason you're saying. So by the definition, of enabling, getting up and getting the drink is enabling her not to get up and get the drink, right? And yet she did something hard. So I think it's really hard, especially when trying to live in a black and white world, to see and understand the difference between enabling and versus support. Like it's kind of like with kids, what's the loving thing to do? In this moment, is the loving thing to say no, or is the loving thing to give room? And I don't always get the same answer.
Well, life is so complicated, and every situation is a little bit different. We have a niece who has Down syndrome, so there are things that she struggles with. And I love how her parents deal with her. And it's just like, you can, I know it's hard for you, but you know what? You can do hard things, and we're here to help you. So it's affirming that it's hard. It's saying you can do hard things, and it's offering the support.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I was thinking about it as far as kids going to school. We don't go in and just give them a calculus test right out the gate.
Right.
We first show them what we want them to know, and then we test for understanding. It's not even like testing to yes, it's testing to get it right, but it's more of a test to understand, like, am I, and then where do they need extra support? Enabling the child on that test, I think, would be giving them the answers
Right.
without giving them the tools to be successful.
Or even worse yet, just saying, well, everybody gets a passing grade for participation.
Right. I mean, but also it, okay, so let's take that example of the, so we could do that. We could totally take away that there's any value in the test. Everybody's just going to get an A. But or we could also be like, well, you got an F, so you're not smart. You're not this. You know, we could totally go the other way and tear them down and not be supportive. You know, I like to think of like Christopher Reeves. You know, him and his family were able to start a nonprofit, and they did a lot of work, and he needed support in order to do that. Mm-hmm. Or like even Stephen Hawking. We wouldn't have most of the things we were able to learn from him had he not had support and tools.
Well, this brings up a very interesting point, because, you know, here we're talking about the interdependence of people. And so mm-hmm. you see that a lot with people who have some kind of disability, because mm-hmm. people with disabilities may need support above and beyond what the normal range is. Right. And I use that word very, you know,
the word normal.
Yes. Because, you know, relatively damaged we all are in some way or another. Mm-hmm. But the interdependence of things. So, you know, I remember when working, there were people, you had people who had job descriptions, and mm-hmm. you put them in a task. Now, was I being enabling when their skill set didn't quite fit those requirements of the job? Or did I use flexibility when I looked at all of my staff, said, who did what the best? What were they strongest in? What were their likes? What were their dislikes? Mm-hmm. I wanted to give a supportive environment to enable people to succeed.
Yeah, gosh, and that takes,
rather than fit them in a box. Yeah.
Right. I think that takes empathy. There was a reel, I believe I saw, I can't remember who it was, but there was given a very good explanation about what empathy is. And it talked about a business environment. And in the business environment, one boss came in and said, after 3 months of lacking sales, and says, if you don't get your numbers up, you're out of here. And in a similar situation, a boss with empathy says, hey, your numbers have been down for 3 months in a row. What's going on, and how can I help? You know,
it's so funny that you just mentioned that, because I just read that the other day. Yeah, well, that's it. Because, you know, truth be told, maybe he's having problems at home. Maybe there's an illness in the family, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's you can't take these things out of isolation. We have to work in conjunction with each other.
Yeah. And that can be hard.
Well, it can be very hard, because, you know, when I just have to worry about myself and what I'm doing, I only have to manage one person. But, you know, just like you and I, we have to come together, and it's two of us now. What are we going to talk about? How are we going to talk about? Do we agree on this? Do we disagree on this? How can we come together and have this conversation? So there's some planning involved. It's not just what's in my mind and I'm going to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even this morning, hey, there's a thing on the to-do topic.
Right.
Are you okay with that? You know, like, again, like, we do have to check in with each other and see what that means, you know, and that's that interdependence you're talking about.
But, you know, so mathematically speaking, 1 + 1 = 2. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think on a personal level, 1 + 1 is more than 2. when two people are working together cooperatively to get something done. Um, and sometimes you're working directly together, sometimes you're splitting up tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, we do that at home a lot with the chores around the house.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. I mean, and even what you're saying, like chores and working together, what that's reminding me of is how my caregivers help on the podcast, and it's their hands when we do any editing to get ums and uhs out on the regular audio only podcast.
mhm.
And so is that enabling or is that supportive, right? And so I could not do that without them. And there's this really beautiful thing that happens when I'm sitting next to the caregiver and instructing them on what I need them to do. And it's actually creating that interdependent relationship, um, where it's almost like it's a whole new entity.
Mhm.
There's that it's not just me editing, but it's us editing, and while they're doing what I'm saying, they also can give their opinion, and then sometimes, like, it turns into more, which I think is
Right.
really beautiful.
Yes. And I'd be interested in hearing one of your caregivers' opinions. Do they find that work satisfying?
I think from what they tell me, yes, they enjoy it. Just we
Yeah.
usually end up processing something while we're editing a podcast.
And see, and that is the beauty of that joint work. You know, and I'm going to put it in something here. We apologize for the technical difficulties last week that you did not have a podcast.
Yes.
We had some technical difficulties because I was on vacation and we had a recorded one queued up, but it didn't happen. So we're
Yeah,
glad to be back.
we
But
are.
so while I was on vacation, we were playing this game called Joker. And it's a game where you play individually, but you also play cooperatively.
Okay.
And so that was very interesting in terms of once you finish your own game, then you work with your other team members to help advance their game. So the idea is the team wins.
Ooh.
And so I had never played before, and this was the first time I played. Um, and I picked up on it right away. And I think because I have had those experiences where, obviously I've played games and we've all played games like Sorry or uh, of that ilk where you're playing for yourself and you're trying to win.
Right.
Um, and this game had those elements, but also the element of this cooperation. And having had that experience, and looking at life in that way as it can be a game, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a win-lose game. It can be a how can we optimize
Yeah.
the play to achieve the goal
Right.
of
When you
whatever it is.
and when you say game and you say life, of course, it reminds me of Dr. Fred Blum, because I think I'm trying to remember the question off the top of my head, but what makes a game, right? It's we choose the game, So is our game going to be win and lose, or is it going to be interdependent? And then it reminds me of there's a Jane McGonigal, wrote Super Better, and I think also Reality is Broken.
Mm-hmm.
And what yeah, that's the name of the book. And I actually chose to read Reality is Broken many, many years ago because I didn't understand gaming, and which doesn't make sense. I think it's probably one of the first times in my life where it's like, I don't like gaming, but I'm going to read this and see what it has to say, right? Like, to be open and willing that maybe I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And she also wrote Super Better, which actually there is an app that goes with that book. I think it's still available, that's free, and it actually helps people with depression and anxiety, insomnia, different things like that, and it turns it into a game, and you can even set up you can level up and you can create your own game in this app. It's actually really, really cool. But And I did adjust this quote a little bit. I just at the beginning, and this is out of Super Better. I said the player needs, and then the quote is a challenging task to perform and sufficient skills to meet the challenge, or at least to come close enough that they are energized to try again and do better. And I think that in life, that's how we support people. You know, when I go into, for instance, I didn't realize that I had a child that had some learning challenges, and so when when she was younger, I got frustrated and I could not understand, and I was so like, I really didn't understand. I'm like, this is easy. Just do your homework, you know? Like, I didn't know that there was other stuff going on below that. And I didn't have the knowledge. No one said, hey, by the way, these are some things you might notice about your child if they're struggling and may have a learning disability. And here's how best to work with them or how you find it out. I didn't have that. So me, I thought that I would be enabling her because in my mind she could do it. But I didn't, that wasn't her mind, and that wasn't how her mind worked. She couldn't do it. She actually needed more supports. So that's where, again, like what you were saying at the beginning of this conversation, it's convoluted. How do we know? How do we look? Sometimes I think we just have to experience it.
And that's it. And here, everybody's experience is different. I have a very mathematical mind. I can figure things out. You know, numbers I remember. So math was very easy for me as a kid. And I just remember this. My eighth grade math teacher came to me when I was in college and asked me to tutor her daughter.
Oh,
Because even though she was the math teacher, it was that the expectations like you had, just do it.
yeah.
And it's a lot different when you have that more intimate relationship sometimes. To be that mentor, sometimes you have to have that outside person to be able to come in and have that patience. So I was able to sit down with her daughter and I had that patience
Hmm.
and was able to teach her in a different way so that she could succeed. That's a key point right there is if you are supporting someone,
Mhm.
especially in a learning endeavor, is to realize that everybody has different styles of learning and different ways of thinking through something. And so if you are that person who is that mentor or something like that, going through and having a number of different tools in your toolbox to be able to, okay, this way doesn't work. Well, let's try this way. Let's think about it like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing, um, to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And then it's also amazing because you see the people, uh, the lights go on. Ah,
Yeah.
I get it now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And and then once they make that connection, it's like, I got it. I know my strategy to win the game.
Right. As soon as they get it, and I just want to give a shout out to Jennifer for saying hi. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Um, I I think too that we get into as what came up for me as you were talking, or what popped into my mind is the elderly, and enabling versus support with elderly, and how sometimes, and I've had this experience too, with a significant disability, where too much, they don't want to let me have my fight, whether they realize it or not, right? Like, they just, sometimes I need to struggle, um, and I don't know what it is about the human psyche But for some reason that's why this quote out of Jay McGonigal's book, it needs to be challenging, and we need to have the sufficient skills to do it, and we need to feel that support. I think that we can come close enough to succeeding. And if we can't, how do we do that? Right? So how do we put that in remembering people with disabilities and our elderly too, right?
And I love that you brought that up because there's so many parallels to that. I look, my mom will admit she's technologically challenged. She didn't grow up with the technology like I did. She didn't work in the field like I did. Um, and so things happen, and I get the phone call, can you come over? And that's given me the challenge to, okay, I'll come over, but to help her understand the technology in a way that she can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's a lot of times using older metaphors that a young person wouldn't even get at all.
Right.
But my mom gets. Oh, okay, now I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes it easier. And then sometimes it's just writing down, occasionally it's just writing down step by step what needs to get done. And as we know, technology changes. So I often have to go back and rewrite it because the steps change. Because
right.
my mom just, it's just lack of familiarity.
Yeah.
And, in this case, she says, she tries. And if she realizes she's not getting it, that's when she makes a choice not to play the game anymore. She calls in her the person who, I forget what they call it, stands in their stead to do
right.
it.
Like in baseball, they have the switch hitter. The switch hitter comes in.
The pinch hitter.
Pinch hitter. There we go. I was close enough. Thank you for your support there.
Hey, it's okay. I grew up on baseball, so but yes, it's like, that the manager makes a decision that person is the optimal person to step into that role and be the pinch hitter.
Right.
I was thinking more of like, when somebody challenges somebody to a sword fight or something, and well, I'm not an expert, but I'm going to have this person stand in my stead, who's the the expert sword fighter.
Right. Yeah. Game of Thrones, right? No, I'm just
exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, sometimes we need that strength from someone else because we just don't have the capacity to do right to do that specific thing. And I think that at that point in time, I think in our society a lot of times there's this idea we need to do it alone, and when all of it. Yeah. And then what catches me, at least recently, is looking around. When I start to get into that mindset, I'm going to have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this. And then I kind of catch myself and I go, wait, and I start looking around. What have I made from beginning to end in my home, right? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which means that every single person who put their hands on the computer, created the chip, like all of those people are literally in a support role in my home, because otherwise I wouldn't have the bed to sleep on. I wouldn't have the shoes I wear on my feet. I wouldn't have the braces I have on my arms. And I need those supports, right? And we wouldn't have the program we're using to stream this. Like, so it's really kind of, for me, a game I have to play with myself so that I can see, even right now when I feel like I'm just alone here in this room, even though I'm having a conversation with you, that I am not alone in my conversation with you. There are all these other people that help me get to even that point.
Right.
And I think remembering that helps me to be a little more humble and also more willing to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to give the gift of receiving today and I'm going to ask for help.
Hmm. I love that. I love that thought. Because it is hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's very easy to give help, even when it's not wanted or needed, um, or it's enabling. But to ask for help, to say, "I need help. I can't do this alone."
Well, even with my church, you know, we the one of the guys was calling around for some of the younger kids to do service projects, and you know they had to call so many people because even in a church where we're supposed to be supporting each other, I think there is an idea, or we get it in our heads. I really think is what it is that we need to be the ones doing the help, and you know, one of the beautiful things for me that happened out of one of my most recent experiences is I was talking with one of the kids that was here, and he felt as if he was doing nothing. And I said, "Hold on a second." I said, "I'm really valuing the conversation you're having with me, and if you were busy over there doing that, we wouldn't get to have a conversation. And that's a gift to me." You know, so he, you know, I was able to walk away feeling really good. Like I got to participate and give back, and they were able to and give to me too. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't just a one-way street, it was very much an interaction.
And that again, that leads to that interesting point, going back to the interdependence of people. I think of the small things that I can do. I going in in a door someplace, and I see somebody coming in, holding the door open for them, small things, telling someone, "Oh, you look very nice today," or just, "You have a beautiful smile," something like that. And you never know what the smallest thing can mean to someone.
Oh yeah, I'll never, just because you remind, I don't know why I remembered this, but I remember standing in line. We were checking out of a store, and a gentleman dropped his cane, and I had always instructed my caregivers, ask me if they think I need help, just check in with me, let me have my struggle a little bit. And luckily, the caregiver I had with me at that moment in time, I had asked them. I said, "Hey, could you pick up that cane for him?" And they're like, "Don't you think we should ask?" And I was like, you know, giving them the choice, you know, giving that gentleman the choice. And sure enough, he's like, "Nope, I've got it." You know, but it could have been, you know, something where we just took away that capacity to do. And when he was very capable. So in that situation, that would not have been supportive to just pick it up. So
Hmm.
again, that whole that complex interaction between humans, we just have to maybe check in, and are we being supportive, or are we enabling, and figure it out.
Yeah.
There's no clean answer here. I
there,
really
there,
want to
there
say
is
there's a clean answer, but there's not a clean
there,
answer.
there's you know again, it kind of goes back to that first check off for me. Am I doing something for somebody that they can do for themselves? And a lot of times we don't know that answer. In that case with the man in the cane, you didn't know the answer. You didn't know why he had a cane. And so asking the questions,
Yeah.
um, I think it's a very good way of, of approaching it. Um, because we don't know.
Well, and sometimes the person who needs the support also doesn't know, right?
Hmm.
Like, or they may be unaware, like in this situation of a learning disability. You know, there's an assumption on everyone's side, so they, you know, there's this idea I should not need help, from perhaps the person who does need help, and the other side of, well, I'm enabling if I give that support, you
And see,
know.
I,
So,
I think that's a wrong assumption. I
well,
think, yeah, I think in terms of I should be able to do this.
Right.
You know, and in those cases, like the learning disability cases, let's do it together.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that helps you to see it from the other person's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even like for me, I didn't even know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
To figure it out. Like I had no clue. And sometimes we're going to be in that place too. So I think so again, coming back to, we are all doing this life together. And, sometimes we're going to enable when we think we're supporting, and sometimes we're going to support when we're, think we're supporting them, right? Well, vice versa, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you guys get the idea. Yeah. And what a great thing to practice and to be open to learning, right? That maybe it's I need to be willing to do it wrong. I need to be willing to want to be supportive and maybe enabling, and then be open to the feedback that I'm enabling versus supporting, or vice versa. Because sometimes we just don't know.
And it's like we said at the beginning, it's a blurred line. So, I mean, the other thing is, I like to think that most people are coming with good intentions. So even if somebody sees me struggling and is trying to enable me, and they think they're being supportive, I recognize that they're coming with good intentions.
Yeah.
And then I can take that time, just like your caregiver did to you, to gently correct you.
Well, in a loving way, right?
In a
Instead of
loving
taking
way,
it
yes.
personally and they're taking this away from me, it can be like, oh no, I've got this. Thank you. Thank you for trying.
I appreciate the effort, the support that you were trying to give to me.
Yeah. It's so hard to remember sometimes when we're busy taking that personally, right? When somebody's taking something away.
Yes.
So and I know we're at our third, we're 2 minutes over, but I just want to say thank you for having this conversation with me today, and for really us talking about why it's such a blurred line and why it gets so confusing between, because I think also in society there is this idea of people with disabilities that we enable them, and when a lot of times people with disabilities just need some support and they want to be successful. I know I want to be successful at what I do. And so making sure that people, having these discussions is really, really important, I think, to that, from my perspective, to those of us with disabilities, so that people can see we really do want to make a difference in this world. At least me. And I know a lot of my friends do too.
Absolutely.
So thanks again.
Thank you.
We should see you guys all next week, but if you need some hope, check out the Relatively Damaged podcast, where I interview amazing guests that have overcome some sort of struggle. Hi, Boomer. I think that's Boomer, right?
That was Augie.
Was it? Okay. One of these days I'm going to get their voice down. You can listen to that podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela.
And I'm Kat. See you next